What if Darth Sidious cloned Anakin Skywalker after he burned on Mustafar? That's our story for today. Hope you guys enjoy. I really like this one, and also, I know it's extremely difficult and near impossible to clone Force sensitives, but this story would be so boring if we took that approach. So, we're gonna clone Anakin. Alright, let's get right into it. Our story begins with Darth Sidious arriving on Mustafar and moving through the area to find his apprentice, Darth Vader, but this was not the same Vader that left him on Coruscant. While Vader was alive, he was broken and would need to be completely rebuilt. He was barely any better than that machine Grievous. This would have its ups and downs for Sidious, but as he traveled down the lava bank, he saw something intriguing. Both of Anakin's legs and one good arm were still sitting there, not burned at all. So Sidious discreetly ordered the clones around him to lock the dismembered limbs on his ship, and Vader was carefully picked up, loaded onto the ship as well. As they took off and flew through hyperspace, Sidious considered his options. Cloning was something he planned to go all in on for himself someday, but he would also now run tests to clone Anakin Skywalker and create the perfect dark side clone. It would not be easy, but Sidious had ideas to try and accelerate the growth using the power of the dark side. From here, events across the galaxy would play out, with Vader being put into his suit and rising to meet his master as a new man. Padme would give birth on Polis Massa, and the children would be separated for their own safety as their mother died. Kenobi would travel with Luke to Tatooine, and Yoda would go into exile forever. He could not leave Dagobah, for as long as he was alive, the spark of the Jedi would remain. And over the next month, Sidious would send Vader on easy missions to help him get used to his suit. He would fight Jedi Padawans, and he would struggle at the start, so he would be too preoccupied dealing with his own pain, both physically and mentally, to realize that his master was already beginning to plan to dispose of Vader. On Kamino, Sidious had an entire wing of the cloning facilities given to him and his experiments. Using Anakin's legs and arm, he had begun the cloning experiments and was accelerating the growth at an insane speed. Sidious was growing 100 clones, and he told the Kaminoans to have the clones ready in 1 year's time. Though the Kaminoans told Sidious they would never survive, but Sidious had a plan in 1 year to have just one of the clones survive and be in excellent condition. He would not be denied. So for the next year, the Empire would continue to spread throughout the galaxy as the Imperial military grew stronger every day. Clones would slowly be in the first stages of being phased out, and civilians would be recruited to join the Imperial army. It was less expensive, and it would create millions of jobs someday. And Sidious would sit in his office, giving Vader missions that would get more and more difficult each time, truly testing him, seeing what he was capable of in case the cloning did fail. And one day, Vader returned from a mission extremely damaged, breathing heavily. He had found Jedi Master Luminara Unduli on the planet Kashyyyk. Apparently, she never left after the war, and Vader took her on in lightsaber combat. Vader defeated her, but he did not kill her, as the Empire had future plans for such an influential Jedi Master, so she was taken into prison while Vader went in for repairs on his damaged suit. After this year, Sidious was extremely satisfied with almost everything. His empire was reigning across the galaxy, but he only had one problem. His apprentice was weak. He'd nearly died against Luminara. Luckily, the clones of Anakin were ready for Sidious. And on Kamino, Sidious stood in front of the 100 vats of Anakin clones. He was ready to begin, and so he ordered the Kaminoans to release them immediately. They complied, and all 100 of the clones stumbled out of their vats, immediately falling to their knees or falling flat on their face. The Kaminoans once again told Sidious they were right. The clones were just simply not ready. But Sidious began to laugh, lifting his hands into the air and saying, "The so-called Chosen One is too weak to handle this process, but I only need one to survive." And he reached out now, draining the life force from 99 of the clones, bringing it into himself. For minutes, the room was swirling with the force. Machines, cloning vats exploded. The Kaminoans were scrambling out of the room. Sidious continued on, draining the life force from all of the clones, until they all fell completely dead, except for one. And Sidious stared at the final clone, pouring the life force now of every single Skywalker clone into this one survivor. Once Sidious finally let go, he smiled as the Skywalker clone stood up and said, "What is thy bidding, my master?" Across the galaxy on Mustafar, Darth Vader was in a cave below his castle, working on a new assignment from his master. He'd been using a red lightsaber gifted to him from Sidious, as he'd been unable to make any lightsaber bleed on his own. But with the near defeat at Luminara's hands, Vader thought he was angrier than ever, so he was focusing his rage on her lightsaber crystal, trying desperately to make it bleed. He poured everything he had into it, and a sudden explosion from the crystal sent Vader crashing into the wall. When Vader opened his eyes, he screamed out again in anger. The crystal remained green. Why couldn't he do this? Was he too weak? Not doing it correctly? Deep down, Vader knew the answer, and the answer gave him more fear than anything else in the galaxy. He was still Anakin Skywalker deep down. He could not kill Anakin. Vader remained on his knees, contemplating everything, when he felt a new presence at the entrance. His master. And in front of Sidious was Anakin. How was this possible? Sidious entered and began speaking, telling Vader that their partnership should have been one that lasted generations, if not all of eternity. But Sidious said that Vader was weak. He could not kill Anakin Skywalker. So today, Anakin would kill him. Sidious yelled out with a laugh as the clone of Anakin ignited a red lightsaber, gifted to him by Sidious. Vader ignited his own red lightsaber, approaching his clone. It became clear that the clone was beyond powerful in the dark side, created by the dark side itself. This would not be easy for Vader. The first strike came from Anakin, a powerful swing of his crimson lightsaber, and Vader was stronger physically, so he pushed Anakin back. But Anakin was quicker, and he flipped over Vader, kicking him in the back. Vader recovered, angrily striking at the clone again, as Sidious cackled on the side. The fight continued with incredible speed, Vader's controlled and deliberate movements clashing against the clone's more fluid and reminiscent fighting style of Anakin. Lightsabers danced through the air, leaving trails of light against the cavern walls as they moved to the outside of the cave. And with a surge of the Force, Vader sent boulders and debris hurling towards the Anakin clone. The clone was able to dodge all of them, throwing his lightsaber now, clipping Vader's shoulder as the two of them got back into a stance. Vader stood on the edge of a cliff now, being beaten backwards, and he used all of his strength to dislodge the lightsaber from the clone's hand, sending it tumbling away. And now Vader charged at Anakin, quickly becoming overconfident as always, and so the clone punched the ground, sending Vader flying into the air. Anakin caught Vader, telling him he failed, and threw Vader down the lava fall, and Vader fell forever. Vader fell and fell and fell, expecting himself to hit the lava, and so he closed his eyes, defeated. But when he opened them, Vader saw only stars, blue bridges, portals of some sort, and his old master, Qui-Gon Jinn, stood in front of him. Vader, no longer in the suit, listened as Qui-Gon said, "You have grown strong and powerful, just as I have imagined." And Vader could only say, "Master." "No, Master, I failed." And Qui-Gon asked, "Do you believe you are the chosen one?" Vader looked around now, hearing distant voices of his past, Padme, his mother, Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, Rex, and he said everything has gone wrong. He's lost everything, failed everyone. How can he be the chosen one? But Qui-Gon told Anakin he still believes that Anakin will bring balance to the Force, that he has had to face his demons, but against all odds, the Sith have failed to turn him for good. Anakin still didn't even know where he was, but he asked Qui-Gon how he should kill the Sith here on Mustafar. But Qui-Gon told him to look deeper. His answer is not on Mustafar. He told Anakin to remember his training, trust his instincts. And suddenly, all of the voices surrounding Anakin became just one person, Obi-Wan. Anakin understood now what he must do, and everything went dark. A moment later, he woke up on the hot sand, crawling to the top. His suit was just lava-resistant enough to push him to land. And Vader understood the truth. He was not powerful because he could defeat anyone in combat. He was powerful because he resisted the darkness. The Anakin in him would never die. He had one huge advantage now. Sidious and the clone thought he was dead. So Vader secretly walked to a hidden, mini landing platform that he'd recently built here. He was no fool. Vader always thought Sidious could someday betray him, so he had a ship transported here that many thought was destroyed long ago. Vader called it the Twilight, and he had repaired it enough to fly out of here. Vader had no idea how to get to Kenobi. He didn't think there would be anyone in the galaxy who knew how to get to Kenobi. but he knew Kenobi's last known place before Mustafar, the Jedi Temple. Perhaps there was some clue in his message that he'd sent to the Jedi. Something. Anything. Vader would find Kenobi. He had to. And so Vader would soon enough enter the Jedi Temple through a back entrance that the Empire knew very little about. The temple was being rebuilt to become the Imperial Palace, but that would still take a long time. So as of now, it was still under construction. Vader, despite his size, moved through the temple secretly but found nothing. He was desperate, and soon enough he came upon a room that he'd always wanted to enter, the restricted section of the archives. It was set to be moved eventually, but right now it was still intact. And so Vader stepped in, deciding to research planets strong in the Force. Perhaps Kenobi had gone to one of them, and Vader looked through them to find Tython, Ahch-To, Dagobah, Lothal, and so on. He just simply didn't have time to check them all. He needed answers, quickly. So Vader continued searching through the restricted section when something caught his eye. A Jedi holocron next to a Sith holocron, and in between them, ancient writing that said, Holocron Fusion. A holocron fusion was the merger of a Jedi holocron and a Sith holocron, which could give those who performed it the answer to any questions they asked. It requires a Darksider and a Lightsider to work together, one to open each of the holocrons. And upon reading this, Vader finally had his first step. He would ask the holocron where Kenobi was. He just needed a light side user. And he had one. Vader snuck back into his ship, taking off for the Spire prison on Stygian Prime. Inside of this prison, Luminara Unduli was doing what she always did in here, meditating. She hadn't really stopped meditating since her capture. It was how she found peace. In meditation, she found answers. The man she fought on Kashyyyk, the man in black armor, was Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One. He had fallen so far, like many young Jedi, including her own Padawan. Luminara realized the Order had fallen as soon as they joined a war, and in time, perhaps the light could rise again. But today, as she meditated, her door opened and she heard the frightening breathing of Darth Vader. Luminara opened her eyes and said, "Hello, Skywalker." She looked past him to see the dead guards at his feet, as he closed the door, walking in to speak with her. Vader said he needs her help. He told Luminara he has realized his mistakes and wishes to correct them. Then Vader presented the two holocrons. Luminara understood. She had access to the restricted section, and she read about holocron fusion as well. Together, they could fuse the holocrons and get an answer to any one question they asked. And so Luminara said she would do it. Vader placed the holocrons on the ground, and the two of them meditated into them. In time, the holocrons rose, and a blinding light came from them, allowing one question for each. Vader simply asked where he could find Kenobi, and he saw something he hated above all else in the galaxy: sand. Kenobi was on Tatooine. Of course. And Luminara asked how to defeat the Sith, but all she saw was the blinding light fade and Darth Vader in her vision. And she also understood. He really was the Chosen One, born to destroy the Sith. He was the answer. Once both questions were answered, the holocrons became unstable, sending an explosion through the cell. Alarms began to blare, and so Vader and Luminara took off through the prison. After some running, the two of them became surrounded just before they reached a landing platform with Vader's ship. Luminara looked to Vader, remembering that he was the Chosen One, and so she told Vader to jump to his ship. She will push him the rest of the way. Vader had no choice but to trust her or be shot down, so he cut a hole in the wall, jumping out into the sky as far as he could. And as he began to fall into the endless sky, Luminara used all her power to push Vader to his ship, and as she did so, security clones shot her dead. Vader said goodbye through the Force as Luminara fell dead through the wall, falling forever. And so Vader took off to the one planet he swore that he could never return to: Tatooine. It was another lonely night on Tatooine for Obi-Wan Kenobi. Every night had been. He couldn't sleep without seeing Anakin. He could barely breathe sometimes. The hot suns reminded him of Mustafar as he'd cut down his brother. The sand reminded him of Anakin sliding down the hot sand, catching on fire. The loneliness reminded him of the empty Jedi Temple, surrounded by the corpses of those he was on a council to protect. But tonight, he finally did fall asleep, but was quickly awoken by screams. Kenobi jolted awake. Another nightmare. But this time the screams continued. They were real, and they were coming from the Lars home. Kenobi jumped up, grabbing his lightsaber, sprinting out to their home. When he arrived, Kenobi found a man in black armor, face down in the sand. It was like he just completely gave out from exhaustion or weakness. And Owen told Obi-Wan that this man knew his name. Obi-Wan turned the armored man over, then removed his mask, and Kenobi felt himself go into a panic attack. Shock, fear, every emotion he was trained to fight off rose to the surface as he saw the face of Anakin Skywalker. But as Kenobi stumbled away, the voice of Qui-Gon came to Kenobi, telling him to save his Padawan. Days later, on Polis Massa, Darth Vader slowly began to wake up in the same room that Padme Amidala died in a year ago. He was without his suit, restrained inside of a Bacta tank by the Polis Massa medical staff, who were friendly to the Jedi. Anakin woke up, looking outside of the tank to see Obi-Wan Kenobi. The last thing Anakin remembered was arriving on Tatooine, finding the Lars family, toppling over from failure of his suit and exhaustion. And now, Kenobi and Skywalker spoke to each other for the first time since Mustafar. Kenobi still couldn't believe Anakin survived, and became this thing. But Kenobi could feel in the Force that the darkness has faded, and so the two of them talked for a long time about everything that has happened since Mustafar. Anakin described to Obi-Wan that he could just never kill the light, and it has taken over him once again. He sees his mistakes, his failures, and he wants to make it right. Kenobi was afraid, but he wanted to believe this was true. He had to, for his own sanity. He took a huge risk leaving Tatooine to help Anakin, instead of leaving him for dead, though he still refused to tell Anakin about the children. In time, if Anakin proved himself to be good, then Kenobi would tell him. So for around a month, Anakin was kept in the Bacta tank as Bail Organa and other members of a budding rebellion would come in and out of Polis Massa to meet with Obi-Wan. Yoda would choose to stay in exile, for as long as he was alive, the Jedi would remain alive, and his days of fighting were long over. But eventually, Anakin, Obi-Wan, and the others had a plan. So finally, Anakin would be released and placed into a suit. But this suit was different. It was better, so much improved, no longer physically painful just to be in, and he could move as well as General Grievous. Anakin hit his hand against his shoulder, and it rang out quite loudly. Beskar? With a small smile, Obi-Wan still said he had some friends on Mandalore. So now Anakin was wearing a hybrid Mandalorian suit that allowed him to move nearly as well as he did before the defeat on Mustafar. The two of them would travel to Mon Cala, as Anakin knew this was a place they had sparks of rebellion beginning to grow. The Empire also knew this, but they didn't care about it yet. In time, Anakin and Obi-Wan would make the Empire care. So for the next year, Anakin and Obi-Wan would work with the Mon Cala army to grow their rebellion. Mon Cala, led by King Lichar and a very large hidden fleet that would be provided to the eventual rebellion, but Skywalker and Kenobi said they could be used much sooner. Admirals Raddus and Akbar of Mon Cala were with King Lichar, Skywalker, and Kenobi every single day as they discussed their plan. Skywalker and Kenobi would often spar against each other, helping Skywalker get used to his suit and new fighting style. And Skywalker had spies in the Empire, mostly deserted, angry clones that he would get intel from. Palpatine had no idea he was still alive, working to take him down, and every day, the Empire took more notice to the growing rebellion on Mon Cala. This was good, and so after the year of preparation, Skywalker learned that the Empire would be launching a secret invasion of Mon Cala, led by the Anakin clone, Moff Tarkin, and the Emperor himself. They thought they would be taking Mon Cala by complete surprise, destroying it without resistance. But oh how wrong they were. Anakin was informed that the 3 Imperial Star Destroyers were in hyperspace, and so the Mon Cala fleet got ready to take down the heart of the Empire. They would be taking the Imperial surprise attack by surprise. And when the 3 Star Destroyers eventually emerged from hyperspace, they were quickly overwhelmed. The Mon Cala fleet, commanded by Raddus and Akbar, quickly took the 2 Star Destroyers on the side by surprise, destroying them from the sides and the back before the Empire could even deploy their fighters. The Empire had thought of itself as invincible, never meeting any resistance until this day, and the 2 side Star Destroyers were bombarded with firepower, crashing simultaneously into the middle one that contained Tarkin, the Anakin clone, and the Emperor. And now came the fight, TIE fighters, Imperial bombers, escape pods, and shuttles poured out of the hangars of the Star Destroyers as they began to explode and fight together. The space battle above Mon Cala officially began, and Anakin was flying his own ship right in the middle of it, looking for one Imperial ship in particular. Skywalker scanned the fight, taking out Imperial TIE fighters with expert maneuvers, until he found it, the Emperor's shuttle. Skywalker flew through space, spinning and dodging Imperial fighters with expert precision, and now he flew against his own clone. The two of them got into a dogfight, but Skywalker was much more experienced and ready than the clone. He shot one of the engines, and the shuttle began to spin down towards the Mon Cala city. Inside of the shuttle, Darth Sidious sat angrily as it began to spiral towards the water. The Anakin clone was doing everything he could to keep it stable, as Sidious now used the Force to keep the shuttle steady. He felt defeated. Something was very off about all of this. How did Mon Cala know they were coming? How were they so prepared? Who was able to shoot down the shuttle flown by the clone of Skywalker? The potential answer put a shiver down his spine, and a moment later, the shuttle crashed into the water. Luckily, the clone landed it near the city, so the two of them escaped the shuttle and got into a tunnel, moving secretly to the Mon Cala hangar, trying to get out of here, to escape, just to retreat. And Anakin flew his own ship down into the city, realizing that Sidious and the clone were heading to the Mon Cala hangar. He apologized in advance to Mon Cala for what he had to do, firing missiles into the hangar. Luckily, there was no one in there, and it started a chain reaction of explosions as every single ship was blowing into pieces. Anakin flew into the hangar, jumping out of his ship and landing on the floor with a strong thud. Sidious and the clone were blasted backwards, hitting the wall hard. They both heard someone land in front of them, and Sidious looked up in horror to see Vader in a much improved suit. He held the lightsaber of Anakin Skywalker, and a moment later, Obi-Wan Kenobi got beside Anakin, saying, "Hello there." And suddenly, the lightsabers of Sidious and the Anakin clone were ignited. Skywalker and Kenobi ignited theirs as well, the blue hue reflecting off the Beskar of Anakin's new suit. There was no need for pleasantries. This was the ultimate fight between the dark and the light. The clash of lightsabers would echo through the chaos of the exploding hangar. As the combatants moved between flaming wreckage, their silhouettes illuminated against a backdrop of destruction. Sparks flew as blades met in a great fight. Explosions punctuated the fight as Obi-Wan took on the clone of Anakin, knowing his every move. Kenobi baited the clone, making him think he had the advantage, and at the final second, Kenobi was able to cut through the clone's leg, then push him with the Force into an exploding ship, and the clone was blown to bits. Kenobi then moved to find Anakin fighting Sidious as the Sith Lord spun, stabbing through Anakin's back. But it never was able to actually go through his back, as the Beskar pushed the saber to the side. This split second of shock from Sidious allowed Anakin to spin back, twirling his blue saber behind him, then stab Sidious through the chest. Anakin thanked him for casting him away on Mustafar, allowing him to find his true purpose as the Chosen One, and he left with Kenobi as Sidious's screams were swallowed up as the hangar went up in one final grand explosion. The blast doors were shut just in time, and the Sith would die alone. In space, Moff Tarkin went down with the Star Destroyers as the Mon Cala fleet was aided by others around the galaxy. Bail Organa rallied people from Naboo, Coruscant, Ryloth, and many other planets to oversee the destruction of the Empire. When it was all over, the top leaders of the Empire were dead, and the Imperial army would spiral into chaos, all of them fighting over control, and in turn, destroying themselves. Anakin, Obi-Wan, and the other leaders of the growing rebellion were all able to overtake the Empire, forcing Mas Amedda to surrender and allow a new republic to begin formation. As the new republic formed under Chancellor Organa, Obi-Wan would take Anakin to Ahch-To, where the two of them would be alone together. Now that it was all over, Obi-Wan realized just how hard it was to forgive Anakin, but he could feel that the darkness was eradicated, so finally, he told Anakin the truth. His children were alive. Anakin was overcome with joy, and he looked on into the setting suns over the ocean, remembering Padme, vowing to train the children as Jedi and make things right, bringing a peace to the galaxy that Padme would have always wanted. And folks, that's our story for today. I hope you enjoyed. Let's talk a bit about it. First of all, I really wanted this to focus more on Vader than the Anakin clone. There was a version of this where, Vader just dies on Mustafar, and then I don't know, Anakin clone and Sidious kind of take over, but I would wanted to rather go down a path where Anakin is cast away by this clone, and he realizes he can, join up with the rebellion or just not be this Darth Vader. Because when he becomes Vader, he thinks that's all there is left to it. But when he's cast away, he sees there's still so much more he can be. And that's what I wanted to really explore in this one. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you thought. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.